Welcome into Basketball Postgame right here on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com. I'm Ben Droz, and I'm joined on the stream by Nick Sainer, who was at the game. Nick, how are you doing today or tonight?
Right, Ben, this is pretty remarkable, I will say. Nebraska comes into CHI. This has been pretty remarkable. Nebraska comes into CHI and knocks off the number 14 team in the land, the Creighton Blue Jays, 74-63. Ben, I mean, here's the thing. We both watched the game, and we'll have Austin Orman. Austin's on his way to the press conference right now, obviously, to talk to Fred Hoiberg and a couple of the players. We'll also hear from Greg McDermott and a couple of the Creighton Blue Jays members as well. First and foremost, thoughts. Hopefully Stephen Ashworth's injury is not too bad. Man, that did not look great in person or over the TV screen, because I pulled it up. I posted a video on Twitter. Scary sight here as he was down for quite a while. But hey, man, Nebraska gets it done. And what a response after they lose to St. Mary's over the weekend at a neutral site game. They come back and really from the get-go, they had a really good defensive game plan against Ryan Kalkbrenner. And frankly, give Fred Hoiberg a lot of credit, because I'll talk about it as we kind of go on, Ben. But over the course of Fred Hoiberg's time at Nebraska, especially the last couple of years, while Nebraska might have been a little undersized down low, they usually have pretty good plans against opponent big men, whether that's Zach Edey, whether that's Kofi Coburn against when you're playing Illinois, or whether it's Ryan Kalkbrenner. Ryan Kalkbrenner hasn't had more than 13 points in his career in a game that he's played in Nebraska. So there's that piece of nugget information there for you. Nebraska's done a really good job. 2 years ago, when they came into CHI and Sam Griesel led Nebraska, and Derek Walker as well, led Nebraska to a victory that day over, I believe that was a top 10 ranked Creighton team. I think they were 7th, if I remember correctly, back in 2022. They did a really good job once again of shutting down Ryan Kalkbrenner. Derek Walker did a really nice job that year. But tonight, Braxton Mia, you can't say enough about him. The transfer, obviously, from Washington, he comes in and Nebraska had a really, really good game plan against Ryan Kalkbrenner, who's been averaging over 20 points per game this year for the Creighton Blue Jays. So it was a really, really fun night. It's kind of turned from one of these things where it's okay, Nebraska's playing pretty well right now. Their game plan came out really, really strong. Creighton at one point switched to a 1-3-1 defensively against some specific lineups that Nebraska had, but yet Nebraska was able to respond. They were ready to kind of try to attack them as well. And Nebraska wasn't great from the free throw line, but they hit enough knockdown jump shots to eventually get a big enough lead. And then it was like, okay, you play, media timeout to media timeout, 4 minutes at a time, essentially. And Nebraska was able to kind of cut this one up. They were able to avoid getting some guys in foul trouble. They were able to go on some longer stretches as well with guys on the bench that were in foul trouble. Braxton Mia being one of those tonight, as well as Andrew Morgan. And so give them credit, man. They did their job, and it also was paired with Creighton having an off night shooting the basketball as well.
Yeah, Nebraska didn't shoot the ball well either, but I mean, you talked about Braxton May. I mean, if you just look at the stat sheet, it looks like he almost had no impact on the game. I mean, zero points. He did have 6 rebounds, but I mean, if you just look at the stat sheet, it didn't look like he did a whole lot. But if you just watch the game, he was just such a vital part of why Nebraska was able to be so dominant, especially defensively.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because, yeah, you're right about that. You got to look deeper than the box score, especially to see the impact that Braxton Mia had on the game tonight. I think, that him being able to get Ryan Kalkbrenner sometimes out of the lane, or whether it was, holding him out and controlling his own, that allowed guys like Juwan Gary to get rebounds, right? Juwan tonight has 7 rebounds. Berke had himself a nice game on the glass with 9 boards, 8 of those being on the defensive end. I mean, that is something that doesn't show up in the box score. And I'm sure Fred Hoiberg will allude to that here in a couple of minutes when we get to talk to him in the post-game press conference. It's just been a really exciting night. But yeah, Braxton Mia, had a really, really good day. And there was a couple of instances and stretches in the game where the officials and the referees were calling the game a little bit tighter than maybe they had in previous instances during the game. And it didn't seem to matter. And Nebraska was able to adjust. And that was one of the questions after even the first game that they won. I mean, we're going back and obviously it's early in the season and on the block. Stricky talked to Fred about this, and I was in there as well. Of like, all right, how long does it take for you to kind of work these little bumps in the road out? And he didn't really give a timeline, but he said, you hope to have it figured out by November 22nd against Creighton, and they did. And so Nebraska, one of the things I was going to say though is it was outside of Bryce Williams, who can step up, right, on this team? Who can step up and either knock down a bucket or can uh, at least steady the ship, whether that's getting to the free throw line, whether that's forcing a turnover, forcing a missed shot, getting big on the glass. It doesn't matter. For the most part, Nebraska had that tonight from a guy like Wally Rooster. At times, Wally Rooster steadied the ship, and obviously that's why you bring in an experienced point guard like himself. And then also you have Juwan Gary and Berke were big tonight in addition to those guys. And so it was, I mean, it's really, really fun. You can't put this, type of response into words then, because unfortunately, you talk about wins that will help you out down the road, or games and performances that help you out down the road. When it comes, tournament time, and if Nebraska's in a spot where, they're either on the bubble or in an advantageous spot, then guess what? This one is going to be one that you can certainly hang your hat on. You came on the road into a sold out crowd here at CHI. There was a lot of Husker fans, but man, they had the blue out going. The student section was crazy, just like usual. And every single time every single time Creighton was trying to get some momentum, try to inject some juice into this arena, Nebraska was able to calm them down, whether that was getting to the line, whether that was calling a timeout. I thought Fred Hoiberg used his timeouts in a really good manner as well tonight, stopping runs if it was after a big Stephen Ashworth 3-point shot, whether it was after a dunk by one of the Creighton Blue Jays as well a couple of times tonight. Every time this arena stood up, Nebraska was able to sit them back down in their seats, whether it was because of drawing a foul, hitting a big shot on their end, or even calling a timeout and just slowing things down.
At what point in the game did you feel like Nebraska could pull this off potentially? Like when did you feel like Nebraska could really pull it off?
I'll be 100% honest. I think so. Austin and I were sitting right next to each other, and even at halftime, and I have the halftime stats with me here, so I don't quote anything. I mean, you didn't expect. Creighton shot 5 of 20 from 3-point land in the first half. At one point, they were 3 of 17. You don't expect that type of performance from the Creighton Blue Jays to go on for a full 40 minutes, right? And Fred Hoiberg talked about it this week in the pressers. He said, hey, listen, they're going to go on runs. They're going to go on runs. How do you respond? And like I just said a couple of minutes ago, Nebraska responded every single time. Nebraska, they didn't shoot a whole lot of 3-point shots. They weren't. I think Creighton's plan coming into this one was they have pretty good faith in Ryan Kalkbrenner down low. Nebraska was going to have to knock down some mid-range shots to win this one, and that's exactly what they did. They shot 12 of 26, just under 50% from the field in the first half, and Nebraska was able to take that 11-point lead into the locker room at halftime. But Ben, to answer your specific question of like, okay, when was the moment that kind of us up here in the press box, which is, by the way, we're about 1,000 feet up in the air. But what I was going to say is there was the moment in the second half where Nebraska subbed Bryce Williams out with 13-19 remaining in the ball game. So there was, still 13-19. Nebraska's up by double digits, sure. But it's one of those things of where I go back to in the first game of the season, it was who's going to take over if Bryce is in foul trouble, or if Bryce is on the bench, or if Bryce gets hurt or dinged up, whatever the case may be, who's going to take over? And there was a stretch of 3 minutes and change, almost 4 full minutes of game time. And it spanned over a media timeout as well, to where Nebraska was able to go on a 13-6 run over the course of the next 3 minutes and 54 seconds that did not include Bryce Williams on the floor. Did not include Bryce Williams, and it did not include Braxton Mia. And at that point, right, Nebraska was able to, I don't want to say limp, but they were able to get to the under 8-minute media timeout in the second half, and they were still pulling away. They were still leading, right? They were still up by double digits. And I think the mentality up here, we just kept saying, okay, they have to keep that distance between it, right? To where if Creighton does go on one of their usual runs of knocking down a couple of perimeter shots in a row, getting some stops defensively, then Nebraska's going to have to be able to weather that, and they need a big enough, margin of a lead to be able to weather that. And they kept that throughout the entire night. They continued to get to the foul line. They didn't shoot very well from the foul line in the first half. They shot 8 of 13, which is uncharacteristic. Nebraska has been one of the best free throw shooting teams in the Big Ten Conference in the early parts of the year. And so it was kind of a topsy-turvy game to where Nebraska, their offense started clicking, their jump shots started falling, and even when they got to the free throw line, which against a Creighton team, Ryan Kalkbrenner, I don't know if you saw my tweet, Ben. This was the first time in 41 straight games, 42 straight games, where Ryan Kalkbrenner had more than 3 fouls. For 41 consecutive games going into this one, Ryan Kalkbrenner had 3 or fewer fouls in every single game. This is, as a team, doesn't foul a whole lot. They're disciplined, and Nebraska was able to have more, draw more team fouls than Creighton has ever given up in a game so far in this early season. So, when you talk about strengths that Nebraska had coming into it, it was getting to the foul line. They did so. And then they had a couple of things go their way. Creighton's poor, 3-point shooting on the entire game. Creighton shoots 12 of 42 from 3-point land. So if I could do quick math here, so they went 5 for 20 from 3 in the first half. They made 7 3-pointers in the second half on, what would that be, 22 shots. So you're talking about 5 of 20 in the first half from beyond the arc, and 7 for 22 from beyond the arc in the second half altogether. Things just went Nebraska's way. But certainly this is not one of those things where it's Nebraska won just because Creighton played bad. Nebraska won because they had a really, really good game plan defensively, and they had some players hit some really good big time shots as well.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of the game plan defensively, I mean, we talked about Mian, his impact on the game, but what do you just think Nebraska did overall defensively that really allowed them to shut down not only Kalkbrenner, but just, I mean, Creighton in general?
Well, it was right from the get-go. And one thing that I noticed up here was the active hands defensively. Nebraska had active hands every single possession, whether it was, we saw Jawan Garrett, we saw Bryce Williams, we saw Sam Hoiberg. Sam Hoiberg one isn't a surprise there because that's kind of what he's built his career here at Nebraska on, is that just gritty, tough, aggressive, annoying in a good way type of defense. And so you had that from those guys, right? The active hands defensively. Braxton Mia, we talked about it, but I mean, you can still use the active hands or the active feet. Berkay on the defensive side of the ball. I continue to implore folks to appreciate Berkay, the way he moves defensively, because a guy of that size moves really, really well defensively. And we saw it obviously against maybe some lesser competition in the early parts of the year, but now you saw it against a top 15 team in Creighton, and Berkay did really, really well for a good chunk of the game. So, I mean, Nebraska was able to get 6 steals in the first half. They turned the Creighton Blue Jays over 8 total times in the first half as well. I just thought Nebraska was really, really active defensively, and a part of something just to kind of watch as the season goes along is, number one, how does Nebraska's defense, which is probably going to be a thing that wins them a lot of games this year, and rightfully so, but how does Nebraska's defense translate to their offense? Because we've seen some guys in years past where it's been, if their shots aren't falling offensively, it translates over to the defense. Now, first off is you can't allow that to happen, because, defense and turnovers and steals will inject life in your offense and give you some potentially higher percentage shots in the transition offense. But number two is Nebraska does have depth, right? So, if you're sitting there and you're Fred Hoiberg going, all right, well, if some guy allows their frustration or mistakes or just struggles offensively to affect their defensive play, well, then guess what? We're going to have somebody else that's able to come in and do the job, right? And we saw that tonight. Like, Aaron Eulis stepped up. Aaron Eulis had a nice game. He was able to hit a big and one. I talked about settling the crowd every single time that they got some juice, trying to inject some juice into them. Aaron Eulis came in, had that and one opportunity from the free throw line. It was just and to add on to everything, just a piece of it is like Nebraska in the second half, which was more impressive, I think, than the first half, in all honesty. You're going right into the Creighton student section. The Creighton student section was here an hour and 15 minutes. It was full, an hour and 15 minutes before game time. This is one that a lot of people were excited about. Downtown Omaha is certainly buzzing, and this place was rolling in the early parts of the game, right before the game started. And Nebraska probably helps having veteran leadership like a Wally Wooster and like a Bryce Williams and some older guys on that roster. Man, all I'm going to say is Nebraska was able to answer the call, and now it's next game up for Creighton. It's a really interesting time. They go to Las Vegas. It's going to be a really competitive tournament there, and then they have to host the Kansas Jayhawks back here at CHI. That's their next home game, and so we're not here to talk about Creighton though. We're here to talk about Nebraska. Nebraska gets a massive win over a top 15 team in the Creighton Blue Jays.
Comparing this team to last year's team, I mean, we know the offense might not be as good as it was last year, but how much do you think Nebraska's team has improved defensively from this year from last year?
Well, I mean, I don't want to pick apart players, right? I think when you look at
Mhm.
the team last year, at times, especially at the guard position, I think Nebraska they were hoping that Casey's offense was going to be enough to maybe make up for if he was a liability defensively, just because of his size, not because of the effort, but because of the size at times.
Yeah.
And Nebraska, for the most part, last year was able to do so. I think they improved a ton down low. I think, I mean, dramatically down low. And Josiah Alec was workhorse for this team last year. It's all important to also add in the Rink Mast isn't available here, and he's out for the entire year. And so you needed guys like Berke, and you needed guys like Andrew Morgan and Braxton Mia to step up. And in the biggest contest of the season so far against the most nationally known opponent, you do, and so that's encouraging for what's to come. I think so I think you improved a ton inside, down low. There was even a moment tonight where Berke got matched up with Ryan Kalkbrenner because Braxton Mia and Andrew Morgan both had foul trouble and they were both on the bench, and so Fred Hoiberg had no choice but to go with Berke Bayuktanjel and match him up on Ryan Kalkbrenner. How about this? I mean, Ryan Kalkbrenner didn't make a single field goal in today's game. He finished off with 4 points. He shot just one shot. He was 0 for 1, and it was a 3-point attempt on the right wing from in the first half. And he went 4 of 8 from the free throw line, had 11 rebounds, which you understand, right? You expected that, and 1 block. But I cannot stress this enough. The job that those 3 guys, and I can, from up here, I can hear Nebraska players shouting down low, but you cannot stress it enough. The job that Berke and Braxton Mia and Andrew Morgan did on Ryan Kalkbrenner. It was a team effort, right? A lot of times with these Fred Hoiberg defenses, we saw it with Derek Walker, and they do it a lot where they'll have help defense come from the backside. And so the guard play was really good too, the defensively. But man, those 3 guys, especially in the time in the second half where it was just a little bit larger than a 10-point lead. I can't remember the exact figure, but it's one of those, once again, where you're playing segments each time, right? Like get to the next media timeout, get to the next media timeout, and Nebraska, and still have a lead, still have a control of this game. And it was one of those things where when Berke got matched up with Ryan Kalkbrenner, I turned to Austin and I said, you can't let Kalkbrenner get too hot. And there was times where Creighton missed him down low. He had good positioning on Berke. He even had at times good positioning on Andrew Morgan. However, Creighton missed him. And so Nebraska was able to not only, for the majority of the time, play some really good defense, but also, take advantage of some miscues and some, uncharacteristic decisions by the Blue Jays. And so there it is. I mean, Nebraska, man, they found a way, and this is now the second time in a row, back to back, they've come into CHI. They lost it at home last year, obviously, but back in 2022, came on the road into this building. I think I was sitting in a pretty similar spot, and they won. And now here they do it again on a Friday night, and hopefully, Ben, that kicks off a really good sports weekend.
Hopefully, yeah, Nebraska football plays Wisconsin tomorrow. But before we end this segment, I know Jake Sorensen was texting you about Connor Essegian,
He
and
was.
yeah, giving you a little hard time because of your take. Was that last week?
Yeah,
Uh,
well, so I will say this, and this is not me
Stress it.
backpedaling. This is
Okay.
not me backpedaling on what I said. I still stand by. I think Nebraska. This was, we talk about uncharacteristic. Nebraska shot really well tonight, and I'm wholeheartedly admitting that they shot the ball extremely well tonight. However, I don't know if that's what we can expect every single game from Nebraska, right? I think there's going to be times where Nebraska is going to look more like they did maybe against St. Mary's, or they look more like they did against some of the previous opponents like UT Rio Grande Valley or whatever it may be, to where they're going to need their defense to really step up. They're going to need to be disciplined in the foul game. But with that being said, yeah, Connor Essegian did hit some big shots. He hit some massive shots for Nebraska, not even in the form of three-pointers. He had a couple of knockdown jumpers. He had a nice little layup. He got to the foul line consistently. That's how he made his mark earlier in this one. Was he got fouled on his first shot attempt from 2, and then he got fouled from 3, but unfortunately didn't make 2 of the 3 free throw attempts, right? So there's still things to work on. And once again, this is not me backpedaling on my Connor Essegian take. I think Nebraska's strength, though, is not going to be shooting the ball. So, yeah, sure, go ahead. Get some more shooters out there. And while Gavin Griffiths is still struggling, didn't play, if any, in that second half, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Gavin Griffiths just 4 minutes off the bench tonight. While he's still struggling, yeah, Connor Essegian's going to need to step up, and he did tonight.
I mean, yeah, Nebraska, I mean, they didn't even shoot the ball that well from deep. I mean, 4 for 16, only 25% from deep. I mean, I feel like that's kind of the most surprising thing is that Nebraska didn't shoot the ball that great from deep. They're pretty good, inside the paint, but
Yeah.
I felt like for Nebraska to win this game, they were going to have to shoot the ball decent. Not like amazingly, but I would have thought they would have had to shoot it decent.
Yeah, and I thought so coming into the game because, frankly, even if you just watch warmups, Ben, Creighton's knocking down consistent shots from outside the perimeter. Nebraska, even in warmups, struggling to just find the bottom of the net, and that's been the kind of the story all year long. And Juwan Gary comes out and he hits he hits a 3 to start. Yeah, I believe he hit a 3 to start. No, excuse me, he missed his 3 to start the game. But then he was able to make one at the end of the shot clock. I mean, you think about the 4 threes that Nebraska made. Here's the thing. It was the 4 threes that Nebraska made. One of them came at the end of the shot clock. Connor Essegian made his 1 3-point attempt, in the first half. So I just you sit there and go, okay, you know what? Nebraska might not need to shoot the 3-point shot. They just need to handle their own on the glass or hold their own on the glass and play good defense, and that's what they did. Here's the thing: Creighton, obviously, Kalkbrenner is so large, and on the glass he's going to pose threats. But Nebraska and Creighton deadlocked at 37 total rebounds. Nebraska out rebounded the Blue Jays by 1 on the defensive glass. I mean, even from the guard rebounding, getting out in transition, that was really good. We saw Sam Hoiberg do that a couple of times. I mentioned Juwan Gary. He's more of that guard forward type of guy. Raleigh Wooster had 4 defensive boards. And Nebraska also gave themselves enough second chance opportunities, 7 offensive rebounds on the day. And they were able to get some tap-ups, tap-ins, and Juwan did that once. Andrew Morgan did that a couple of times. And so Nebraska was able to kind of do the things that they haven't done to this point in the season. And so we can't, if they haven't done it to this point in the season, we can't come in expecting that they're going to do it. But now, here's the thing: expectations have somewhat changed. You have some gettable games coming up here. This is your first big test. Here you go. You passed it with flying colors, and I have no problem saying that. You passed it with flying colors, and you knocked off number 14 Creighton 74 to 63. I mean, so you look at their upcoming schedule before we get out of here. And once again, Austin Orman will join you, Ben. But you have a tough one against South Dakota coming up in just a couple of days. You got to turn around, play them on Wednesday at home. Hopefully a good crowd for a 5:30 tip-off, a little bit earlier there, so maybe a late arriving crowd. But then you play a North Florida team next weekend on December 1st on Sunday. That is on the season, had some nice wins, right? Their one loss on the year has been to Georgia. They went on the road, lost by 13 to Georgia. But this is a North Florida team that was able to knock off South Carolina on the road. They went on the road to Georgia Tech and put up 105 points. And so once again, the tests don't stop. And those are going to be wins that might not help your resume tremendously when you're talking about bubble teams and in March, but it's certainly ones that can hurt your resume and potentially leave you out of the NCAA tournament if Nebraska's right on that bubble. So a lot of work still to do, but a big one tonight that Nebraska had go in their favor.
One last question before I let you go. I mean, how does this game change your view of this team moving forward? Because I know there is a lot of questions around this team. There probably still are some questions around this team, but how has your view of this team kind of changed?
Well, I think part of it is now it's the next step is, can you show consistency, right? Can Nebraska do this consistently? Maybe not to this extent, but are they able to do this consistently over the course of the next couple of games? So I think there's that. I don't know if tonight there wasn't. I don't know if questions can get answered just by one performance. I think that you can start to feel more confident and excited about the future, right? Optimistic. Maybe that's a better word for it. I mean, not that I said this to Austin at one point during the game. Not that Fred Hoiberg's on the hot seat, and I'm not entering that sentiment into this conversation. But Troy Dannon's here, and it's a new athletic director, and this is his first basketball season. And Troy Dannon was directly behind the Huskers bench, and you don't think he likes to see that this win happens in his first year? You beat the big bad Creighton Blue Jays. So like there's a lot of things more so. I mean, yeah, sure. For the scope of this season, yeah, but we talk about the trajectory of Nebraska basketball. It's steadily improved each year after in these last 4 years under Fred Hoiberg, who's in his 6th year. It's steadily improved. They've gotten more and more wins every single year. Recruiting's exciting. They've been able to go out and get some much needed pieces out of the transfer portal, and here you are. I mean, this win does not, or this game does not happen without Braxton Mia, who's a transfer. This game does not happen without Raleigh Wooster, who's a transfer. Even at times, Aaron Eulis or Connor Esijan, both transfers. So while Nebraska returned a lot of experience in Juwan Gary and obviously Bryce Williams, who was a transfer 2 years ago from Charlotte, but played with Nebraska last season. While they returned a lot of experience in that department, a lot of the things that the staff were able to identify in the offseason as needs helped them win a game tonight, and a big one at that.
All right, that's going to do it for this segment. Up next, we're going to have Austin Orman, who's also at the game with Nick, join us on the Owl VIP line. But we're going to throw it to commercial break. We'll be right back right after this.
Tune in to 93.7 The Ticket as soon as the clock hits 0 for the Jay Foreman postgame show. Listen to expert analysis from the Husker Hall of Famer, an 8-year NFL veteran, for 90 minutes after the game. The Jay Foreman postgame show, sponsored by Anderson Ford, Tanner's Bar and Grill, Tavern 180, Elway Power Sports of Lincoln, Vinnie Krekak of State Farm Insurance, and Action Plumbing, Heating, AC, and Electrical on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Are you looking to upgrade or improve the garage door on your home? This is Cameron Hall of Doors Plus. At Doors Plus, we guarantee to offer a wide selection of options from 5 leading garage door manufacturers as we deliver a free estimate, exact measurements, and rapid installation with a 3 to 5 week time frame. When you choose Doors Plus for your residential garage door needs, you'll work with our experienced technicians and be ensured that your new door seamlessly complements your home. Give us a call at 402-590-5800 or visit us online at doorsplusllc.com. Doors Plus, garage doors, and more.
Hey, Nebraska football fans, it's defensive lineman Ty Robinson, and I've got a winning play for you with Action Plumbing, Heating, AC, and Electrical. Team up with Action and install a new Bradford white water heater in your home. And if we win the conference championship this season, you'll get a full refund. Don't fumble this opportunity. Sack your old water heater this season and score big with Action. Visit actionlincoln.com/Huskers to learn more.
Promotion valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Make Hog Wild the centerpiece of your Thanksgiving feast. Pre-order a 12-pound whole smoked turkey or a 4-pound turkey breast for $55. A 4-pound boneless ham is $50. A complete meal includes your choice of a whole turkey or turkey breast, mashed potatoes and gravy, stuffing, green beans or corn, and a dozen rolls for $130. Pre-order online at GoHogWild.com soon. Quantities are limited. All weights are approximate before cooking. Hog Wild Pit Barbecue, Lincoln.
But don't be late, we close at 8.
This is former Husker and NFL linebacker Jay Foreman. For years, I've suffered from degenerative problems in both of my ankles, but thanks to a thorough and thought-out plan provided by Advanced Medical Imaging, I was able to get my life back with the least amount of pain as possible. While working through multiple options, the team of physicians at Advanced Medical Imaging were there to answer any questions I had. If you're experiencing any pain at all and want to get your life back, go to amimaging.com or give them a call at 402-484-6677. Advanced Medical Imaging, located at 7601 Pioneers Boulevard.
Bagels & Joe is the perfect place for breakfast or lunch in November. Try their brand new fall sweet trays, including cinnamon rolls, pumpkin chocolate chip muffins, pumpkin cheesecake brownies, and apple croissants. 4 locations in Lincoln and 1 in Seward. Bagels and Joe.
Get rid of pesky critters once and for all with Bats to Rats. Their expert team is here to help you reclaim your home. No more sleepless nights caused by crawling critters or flapping wings. Bats to Rats ensures a safe environment for every family member. Check the website at batstorats.com for amazing offers. And if you mention this ad, you'll receive $10 off your initial inspection cost. Call Bats to Rats today at 402-781-8691. That's 402-781-8691. Bats to Rats.
At Union Bank, people don't have your money. Your money has people. First home people, investment people, people who answer the phone and your chats, dream car people, dream retirement people, driving your dream car in your dream retirement people, small business people, credit card people, and all the other people you need. At Union Bank, our people help you do more than you dreamed possible. So stop in and say hello. We can't wait to see you. Union Bank and Trust. Member FDIC.
Wall-to-Wall Wine and Spirits is your place in North Lincoln to go for all your needs in wine, spirits, and beer. They also have a large variety of cigars in their walk-in humidor, and they have a top-notch walk-in, temperature-controlled, high-end wine bar. Plus, you can enjoy free samples from their tasting book. There's only one place to go for all your needs for wine, beer, spirits, and cigars. Wall-to-Wall Wine and Spirits on North 27th Street in Lincoln.
One great idea can change your life.
ABC Fridays. Shark Tank is all new.
That's the American dream right there.
With guest shark Todd Graves, founder of Raising Cane's.
I want to be on a team with you.
Emmy-winning Shark Tank, Fridays 8/7 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Are you ready for a new opportunity? Check out Sandhills Global. Join a dynamic team where your skills are valued and your career can soar. We offer full-time positions with a 4.5-day work week, competitive pay, excellent benefits, and a positive work environment. From IT and marketing to sales and finance, we're looking for talented individuals like you. Apply today at sandhills.jobs and take the first step towards an exciting future. That's sandhills.jobs. Don't wait, apply now.
Hey guys, it's your girl Jordan from Sartor Heyman Jewelers. My grandpa Don always made sure that our diamonds are the most exceptional you could find in the world. That's why we're introducing our exclusive Heartland Diamond Collection. If you're ready to add some sparkle to your life that you can see from across the room, the Heartland Diamond is for you. Stop in to Sartor Heyman to see for yourself. Until next time, happy shopping, guys.
The Mill Coffee and Tea, formerly with only 4 Lincoln locations, now 5 Lincoln locations. That's 25% more locations than there used to be. Can you even imagine a world where there's only 4 Lincoln Mill locations? That feels like ages ago. We were all so young then. The Mill on 11th, located right alongside the 93.7 The Ticket Studios on O Street.
Are you a veteran looking for a new companion animal? A dog, a cat, or maybe something else? The Nebraska Department of Veterans Affairs Vets Get Pets program can cover up to $350 of your pet adoption fees. Visit veterans.nebraska.gov/vetsgetpets to learn more about program requirements and how to apply. Want to help support the program? Get your Vets Get Pets specialty license plates from the Nebraska DMV. Sponsored by the Nebraska Department of Veterans Affairs. Aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
93.7 The Ticket is proud to provide listeners with daily opportunities to win contests and prizes on our airwaves, and would like to take this opportunity to remind you of a couple rules. All participants must be 21 or older and must wait 30 days after winning a prize before participating in another contest. Once you win, you have 30 days to pick up your prize at the K&TK Studios, 1040 O Street in Lincoln, or your prize will be forfeit. Thank you for participating in our contest, and thank you for listening to 93.7 The Ticket.
Welcome back into Postgame right here on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com. I want to thank Nick Sainer again from streaming in from the game after post-game. We're going to bring Austin Orman here as soon as he's able to call in. He went to the post-game press conference, so he's going to be calling in here pretty soon. But until then, I don't want to forget that post-game is sponsored by Action Plumbing, Heating, and Electrical, as well as Wall-to-Wall Wine and Spirits. So both of those, thank you to our sponsors for basketball post-game. But while we wait for Austin to call in, I mean, I would say my biggest takeaway from this game was just the fact that Nebraska was able to just dominate the interior. I know Nick kind of talked about that a little bit, but in my opinion, I think what this team has improved on the most from last year is the depth on the inside. The depth on the inside is going to be a key factor to see how far this team can go. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, this is just never going to be a really good three-point shooting team, in my opinion. I just don't think there's that many shooters on the roster. I mean, you have a season, and I mean, you have some shooters, but I don't think this is ever going to be as good of a three-point shooting team as Nebraska was last year. So they're really going to have to rely on really good interior play. And right now, they're getting that. And they have a lot of depth on the inside. And that's something that Nebraska really didn't have last season. I mean, they had Mast, who wasn't really isn't really a defensive player, offensive player. So we're talking about doesn't really contribute as much on the defensive end. And then you had Alec, who was a big energy guy, but sometimes wasn't the most productive with his minutes. Nothing to take away from Alec. He was a big part of Nebraska's success last year. But I just think on the inside, Nebraska just has so much more depth. But I want to go to some of the comments that we have on YouTube. I want to read this one from Grevin saying, nice win, and you might have looked like on paper after the St. Mary's loss, but if you saw the game, you knew we were good. It was a close one. The teams has some fight. Think this is a tourney team. Now, I mean, what I want to address from this comment is him saying that he thinks this is a tourney team. Now, I mean, after a big win against a team like Creighton, I mean, a team that's ranked number 14th in the nation, or 14th, I believe. I mean, yes, that's going to be kind of the hyperbole that's going to be said right away. But I think it's very early to still say whether this team's going to, I mean, for sure, a tourney team or not. But I mean, if they keep playing like they did tonight, it's very feasible to get back into the tournament. This was always, I think, going to be a little bit of a struggle to get to a tournament game this season, but to get to the tournament this season. But I mean, a big win like this against Creighton is definitely going to help. But Austin Orman is now calling in on the Owl VIP line. So I want to bring in Austin Orman. Austin, how are you doing tonight?
Ben, what a night at the CHI Health Center in Omaha. Wow, that was a game. That was a game. Reminiscent in a lot of ways of the 2022 Nebraska versus Creighton game up here in this very building. It was a good night for Husker fans. It was a heck of a night up in Omaha. Rowdy crowd, excited crowd. Didn't necessarily transfer over to the Jays, though. Nebraska came out, swung first. Nebraska kept swinging. Nebraska gets its biggest win of the season, obviously, but more importantly, I think Nebraska played its most complete game of the season, and they picked the best spot to do it.
Yeah, Austin, you were at post-game. Me and Nick really dove into the game, but I kind of want to get some of your thoughts on what was said post-game. Did you go to Hoiberg and Creighton head coach, or what post-game did you go to, Austin?
Yes, heard from both Fred Hoiberg and Greg McDermott. Who would you like to hear from first, young Ben?
Let's get McDermott. I'm interested to see what he has to say after his team's performance. I mean, they definitely, fought to the very end, but just came up a little bit short. I mean, what did you take away from McDermott's post-game presser?
Started off with his opening statement. He says, first of all, he tips his hat to Nebraska. They had a great defensive plan to keep the ball out of the paint. Obviously, Creighton didn't shoot it well. They take over 43 for the third straight year against Nebraska. He notes probably the biggest thing was the uncharacteristic, foolish turnovers that Creighton had. I believe, let me pull the stats up here. It was pushing 20 if it wasn't
17.
Over. The 17 turnovers, yeah, and 22 Nebraska points off of them. He would go on to say toward the end of the press conference that, getting down by 18 points wasn't easy. He credits his team for finding a way to fight back. But they still only lose the game by 11 points. And he said, you lose by only 11 points, which here's the thing. The point spread coming into the game was Creighton favored by 10.5. Nebraska did a complete mirror image reversal of that spread and winning tonight 74-63. But he also said that, the turnovers were what killed them. They were uncharacteristic. And because it was just an 11-point game, he says it'll be an easy time for him to go back through the film. First of all, offensively, right? That's where Creighton is always going to butter its bread, is on the offensive end. He says he can easily find 3 possessions that he'll show his team, he'll show his coaches, and they won't even recognize who's out on the floor because it doesn't look like the Creighton brand of basketball that Greg McDermott has instilled in his guys. Same thing defensively. Let me find the quote here. Yeah, he says not a lot of great communication, some missed assignments there. And in his own words, it only takes 3 possessions on offense, 3 possessions on defense to switch an 11-point game back in Creighton's favor.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest takeaway is they're obviously not okay with the result, right? He says to be the type of team that they want to be, they have to find a way to defend home floor. But someone asked him about just the nature of the series, Nebraska making life beyond difficult for Ryan Kalkbrenner tonight. And McDermott says that's the risk that Nebraska takes. If they're going to commit so much to Ryan Kalkbrenner and fronting him in the post and having someone very consistently tonight, more consistently than Nebraska's been all year at having that backside defender, Creighton's going to get open threes. This is a program that has gotten a little bit better about, not living and dying by the three, such as it were, but they still take a lot of them. So he says, yeah, he likes the vast majority of the shots that they got. He trusts his guys to knock them down. You want to credit Nebraska because it was probably more than just shooting variance. Nebraska certainly provided a step up in defensive competition for the Jays tonight. They faced a couple of common opponents, FDU, UT Rio Grande Valley as well. So I think you mix Nebraska's effort and energy with Nebraska's game plan to frustrate Creighton's best player. Toss in, the little spice of shooting variance that went Nebraska's way, not Creighton's tonight. And there's the recipe for your upset 11-point victory for the Huskers.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I don't like simplifying the game this much, but I mean, I think the fact that Creighton only shot 28% for the 3-point line. I mean, yes, they turned the ball over a little bit more than they would have wanted to, but that was the difference in the game. If Creighton even shoots just 35%, just hits a couple more threes, I mean, the whole complexion of this game could be completely different. Kalkbrenner would probably get some more open opportunities down low, and Creighton would maybe get some more momentum, especially them being at home, playing at home. I mean, just the fact that they were only able to shoot 28%. I mean, Nebraska was just, in my opinion, at times is kind of praying that they'd miss some shots.
That's exactly what it was. And ironic that they're praying at the Catholic school, but we'll leave that for another time. It's been Nebraska's game plan under Fred Hoiberg, right? They have their plan. They're going to stick to it. Fred Hoiberg gave a lot of credit to Nate Lenzer for the defensive game plan. And we saw the same sort of defensive mindset from Nebraska. I wondered if we would see some possessions where Nebraska would just play straight up on Ryan Kalkbrenner and stay more attached to shooters around the perimeter. They didn't do that. To the very end, they stuck to their identity defensively. That is a credit to Fred Hoiberg, to Nate Lenzer, Adam Howard, Ernie Ziegler, the rest of the staff there. And, shame on me for thinking Nebraska would go out of it, right? Just as a change-up, just as something different to do. I learned tonight, I'm not going to make this mistake again moving forward, Nebraska is comfortable with its defensive identity. Nebraska is comfortable playing this sort of game, just praying guys miss. We've seen it come back to bite the Huskers. We really have. But like Creighton was willing to do today offensively, it's the exact same thing for Nebraska defensively, right? How did Nebraska win this game offensively? By hitting shots in the mid-range. Bryce Williams, early, Connor Sejan hit a few. Nebraska got to the free throw line, maybe a little bit less tonight than they have in the previous few games. But if you tell Creighton that Nebraska beat it from the mid-range, Creighton says, okay, tip your hat, credit to them, we got to get better. Flip side of that coin, if you tell Nebraska that they won this game or Creighton that they lost this game just due to shooting variance and some dumb turnovers, Creighton takes that all the time. They like the looks they got. They thought they would outmass Nebraska, right? Maybe make a lower number of shots, but make that up by making more three-pointers than Nebraska did. Both teams have an identity. We really saw that play out tonight. And for the second time in 3 years, and now back-to-back trips to Omaha, it was Nebraska's identity, Nebraska's roll of the dice that came up with the magic number for the Huskers.
Yeah, and I think the biggest reason why Nebraska's game plan, kind of just letting Creighton shoot it and hoping is that Creighton really relies on just 2 guys to be able to make threes consistently. I mean, Ashworth and Isaacs, they went 9 for 25. Pretty decent. The rest of the team, they only made 3 threes. 3 for, if I'm doing quick math, 7, 8, 11, 17. They were 3 of 17. I mean, they only had 2 guys. So I feel like Nebraska was able to kind of maybe put a little bit more attention on just those 2 shooters that they knew can maybe knock them down more consistently. And the rest of the team, this didn't shoot very well.
I yes and no. Nebraska, I mean, in games like this, in every game, a team has a guy or two that's going to go off, right?
Yes.
Pop Isaacs is a microwave scorer. He's not nearly as consistent from three-point range, right? The way that he shot tonight is not necessarily indicative of who he's been over the course of his career.
Yeah.
He's a good scorer, right? You don't want to let him get hot, but of the guys that Nebraska was going to let shoot, you would rather have Pop Isaacs take those shots. You would rather have Jemiah Neal take those shots than Stephen Ashworth, who was doing some damage. I mean, he is an elite off-ball mover, right? Maybe not the tightest handle, maybe not the shiftiest guy with the ball in his hands, but, you know, at 6'1", he's got to be creative and find ways to get his shots up. Stephen Ashworth did a good job of moving without the ball. Nebraska lost him a couple times. So someone or someones are always going to go off. Part of Nebraska's dice roll, though, is make the role players play like stars, right? On a night where Ryan Kalkbrenner was frustrated, didn't show it, did a good job of keeping his head, his composure, still had an impact. McDermott pointed out that he drew 10 fouls in the game, and his presence created those open threes. What Nebraska did was said, okay, Isaac Trout, step up and make a shot. Jackson McAndrew, I think, hit 1 or 2 of those threes. He is an elite 3-point shooter coming out of the high school ranks. Even the name's going to escape me here. Not Jason Green, Mason Miller. Those guys that Creighton plays at the power forward position outside of Jason Green are good shooters. There's a reason Creighton wanted them. So it's not that other guys can't shoot on Creighton's team. They'll have games where they go off. Jackson McAndrew had 15 to lead Creighton in its last game. But again, that's part of the dice roll that Nebraska took, is that they could slow down Creighton stars enough, put enough pressure on role players with additional volume, and trust in the defensive game plan, hope, pray, whatever you want to say, that those role players wouldn't shoot like stars and, you know, give Nebraska enough margin for error to get out of the CHI Health Center with the win, just like it did tonight.
Before we go over to Hoiberg postgame, I want to read a text. Drew and Wahoo said, I mean, you got to give Nebraska credit for defending the 3 instead of saying they are praying they miss, shaking my head. I mean, I want to say, yes, I agree with that to an extent, but I feel like that poor shooting was more just a bad shooting night than Nebraska doing anything, you know, special defending the perimeter. Am I wrong to think that?
Well, it's both. Was that Drew and Wahoo you said texted?
Yes, that was Drew and Wahoo.
Yeah, Drew, I hope I wasn't saying it was just shooting variance, because there are knock-on effects, right? The way that Nebraska was playing, the speed that they closed out, they ran the right guys off the line. They closed out short to stay in front of the drivers like Neal and for the most part Isaacs as well. The part of the reason that Creighton shot poorly was because Nebraska defended well. Nebraska made Creighton work for its shots, right? That they didn't come easily in transition. It wasn't like last year where Nebraska was so out of rotation. So I guess off the top of my head, I would say that it was probably somewhere between 65 and 75% Nebraska in terms of the reason Creighton shot so poorly. Nebraska hounded on the perimeter. Credit Sam Hoiberg, credit Aaron Eulis in their minutes for doing it. But we would be lying if we said Nebraska made it tough all night. There were stretches where Nebraska wasn't as crisp in rotation, where Nebraska wasn't as communicative as the coaching staff would like. Now, they were better more often than not, but it would also be misleading to say it was a lockdown defensive performance by Nebraska, because Creighton had, of its 42 3-point attempts, I would say, you know, at least 8 or 9 of them came off of really good offense by Creighton or miscommunication by Nebraska. So, yeah, credit the Huskers more defensively than Creighton just missing. But as always, in the pursuit of perfection, there's plenty for Nebraska to clean up.
No, I definitely agree with that. All right, let's get to some Hoiberg post game. I mean, what was the message for Hoiberg after a big win for his guys tonight?
The thing that stood out to me, it came pretty late in the press conference. Let me scroll through and find it here. What stood out to me was, here we go. talking about Juwan Gary, there's a stretch there where we heard a lot from Juwan Gary. Not many Huskers have won twice in Omaha. I believe our own Eric Strickland is one of those guys, so shout out Stricky for that. But yeah, two of the last 3 years, Juwan Gary has not just beat Creighton, but done it in Omaha. And Fred Hoiberg gave number 4 a lot of credit for the way that he rallied the team, the way that he stepped up as a vocal leader. I've been critical of Juwan Gary. I understand his importance to the team better now tonight than I did before. Juwan Gary has struggled offensively, right? In terms of finishing at the rim, hasn't been great. What did he do tonight? He took it right at Ryan Kalkbrenner and finished over him. Juwan Gary, not an elite three-point shooter. He took the first 2 shots from 3 for Nebraska tonight, went 1 of 2. He's just dangerous enough as a shooter that you can't let him get hot. But at the same time, again, Creighton's going to live with Juwan Gary beating them offensively. But Fred Hoiberg didn't just say once or twice, but it's at least 3 times, crediting Juwan Gary, for stepping up as the leader of the team this week. He said he was really proud of him and that Nebraska needed someone to step up as the vocal leader. We thought that was the role for Juwan Gary coming into the year. He proved tonight that that's his role, that's what he wants to be. In a perfect world, you see more offensive consistency. In a perfect world, you don't see Nebraska running ISOs for Juwan Gary, a guy that I still don't think is a primary offensive option. But Nebraska might not have any. So we might get a couple Juwan Gary ISOs a game from the elbow or maybe from the extended wing. So where I'm going to grow, what I'm going to keep in mind moving forward is just how important Juwan Gary became to this team emotionally and mentally this week in helping them get past the loss to St. Mary's in Sioux Falls.
Yeah, I mean, he played the most minutes in the game, 34 minutes, 16 points, 6 of 13 shooting, 2 from 5 from behind the arc. I mean, Gary was doing it on both ends and just also being that vocal leader. I mean, he was a huge part in that game. I mean, his 1-3 at the end, I don't remember what point in the game it was, but I know he had a big 3 right at the end as the shot clock expired. I mean, that 3 was just huge.
That was early in the second half as Creighton was trying to crawl back in. And I believe, let me check the scores. Did Nebraska make 4 threes for the game?
Yeah, 4.
Yeah,
4-16.
That was Nebraska's final 3 of the game. The fact that Nebraska could go, gosh, I don't even know, probably it was double-digit minutes, I believe, without making a 3 and still find a way to close that game out. It's incredible. If you would have told me that before the game, I would have said, yeah, no shot, unless the game played out the way it did. But again, something to keep in mind, you need box score contributions from Juwan Gary as one of the more experienced guys on this team as a starter, but his impact all year is going to go far beyond the box score.
No, I agree. Same thing with Braxton Mia. I mean, if you just look at the box score, I said this when me and Nick were talking, it looks like he didn't do much at all in the game. I mean, he had 0 points. He did bring in 6 rebounds, but he only played 11 minutes. You would be like, oh, it wasn't that big. He was a huge part in the few minutes that he played of, bringing that defensive intensity inside. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. This is, again, a guy that I talked down on a little bit today and over the last couple of days. I didn't think he gave Nebraska, its best shot to win. I thought Andrew Morgan was a better matchup, or even Bear Cable Ethan Gel, just because Kalkbrenner is becoming so much more comfortable from beyond the three-point line. Not his biggest strength, but he's had games where he's shown how comfortable he is stepping out. I thought Creighton would leverage that a little bit more than they did. They didn't draw it up for him. Nebraska did a good job of not leaving him wide open. I think his first field goal attempt was a right wing corner-ish 3, and Nebraska lives with that, right? But what Braxton Mia did was he provided that physical presence inside. He's a little bulkier, a little thicker than Kalkbrenner. He had his fouls, and he used them, right? Again, kind of that knock-on effect. Kalkbrenner's in much better shape now than he was even as a freshman. He's got a lot of the load put on him just because of what he's been able to do for a few years for Creighton now. I thought Braxton Mia was going to get played off the floor. He absolutely didn't. Did not have really anything of a role offensively, but what he was able to do defensively, even some of the fouls, right? Being physical, hitting Ryan Kalkbrenner. It's what we talk about in football, right? The blows add up. That's kind of what Nebraska did tonight, was run the ball for 3 quarters with Braxton Mia. He had to go to the bench because of foul trouble. But when he was in the game, he was telling Ryan Kalkbrenner, hey, I'm here. Hey, you're not getting deep post position. you might be a little skinnier, a little more agile than me, but you're not going to outwork me. You're not going to get deep post position with the chance to make a move and go score. Big credit for Braxton Mia for what he did tonight. Whatever Nebraska paid him out of the transfer portal, I think he made it worth it just with his performance tonight.
Real quick, let's get WeGo ID in before I ask a couple questions. WeGo ID in 93.7 The Ticket.
This is Lincoln's home for sports talk on the FM dial. Also online at theticketfm.com. On the internet. KNTK FM Firth. 93.7 The Ticket.
So, I mean, going back to Nebraska side thing, when I just look at the split box, comparing the stats of both teams, Nebraska shot it a little bit better from the field, 42% to Creighton's 33%. 3-point percentage, though, about the same. Creighton shot it a little bit better, but they took a lot more. The thing that jumps out the most is the turnovers. Creighton 17, Nebraska only turned the ball over 7 times. And I mean, that, in my opinion, was just, yes, Nebraska played great interior defense. Yes, they were guarding the perimeter pretty well. We're scoring on the inside. But Nebraska only turning the ball over 7 times was huge. And also forcing 17 turnovers. I mean, they had how many points off turnovers? 22 points off turnovers to Creighton 7. I mean, I really feel, that's the thing that jumps out to me the most. Because if Nebraska, let's say, if both teams were to turn the ball over 14 times, I don't know if Nebraska wins at all convincingly. I mean, it's probably a really close game where Nebraska probably loses, in my opinion.
I think that's fair. Uncharacteristic turnovers from Creighton. McDermott said that's been on his radar, and they didn't get away with it tonight like maybe they had in their previous games. It's been a focus for Nebraska. It's needed to be.
Yeah.
Strick and I have talked about this going back to even last year. Nebraska can get a little loose with it sometimes, right? Just go through the motions and flip it. There was one really bad run from Bearcave Oetengel, who tried to give it up to, I want to say Bryce Williams, or maybe it was one of the point guards. But anyways, it led to a Jemiah Neal dunk in transition, gave Creighton a little bit of life. You take that one out, there was one other real bad miscommunication. Turnovers are going to happen. Nebraska did a much better job tonight of making the simple play, playing off 2 feet, not forcing passes, not getting over eager. This is the most comfortable Nebraska has looked offensively this year. It's kind of wild to say when you're facing a 3-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year in the middle.
Yeah.
Oh, and guess what, young Ben? 28 points in the paint for Nebraska.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of that overlaps with the points off of turnovers. Nebraska wasn't scared of Ryan Kalkbrenner, but they didn't challenge him recklessly either. They did a good job of picking their spots. They did a good job of knowing that in Creighton's drop, the mid-range would be available for them. Nebraska really controlled this game, right? You always felt like Creighton was going to make a run. The Blue Jays did, got it back to within at least 7, if not 5 at one point. But Nebraska never got out of control. Nebraska never got rattled by the moment. There were a couple big shots from Bryce Williams and Raleigh Wooster that helped Nebraska ultimately salt this one away.
Yeah, I mean, this team, I think it's pretty fair to say that I don't think this team, even by the end of the year, is going to be as good of a 3-point shooting team, Nebraska, as they were last year. So what do they need to do? They need to rely on interior play and also just not turning the ball over as much. Relying on your defense, turning that into offense when you're not able to hit from deep. This is just kind of, do you feel like this is a little, I don't want to say uncharacteristic of a Hoiberg team, but I don't feel like this is usually how Hoiberg has his teams, but maybe I'm a little off on that.
No, and I think, I've asked Fred Hoiberg at least once, if not twice this year, about his team's 3-point rate. He's talked about his team's 3-point percentage. I do think that, in theory, Nebraska has good shooters. I have no worries about Bryce Williams. And that's really the list, right? Connor Seaton is still 30-something percent, kind of hit or miss. Gavin Griffiths, not shooting it well. Juwan Gary, spotty here and there. Andrew Morgan, not a consistent guy. Bearcave Oetengel, not exactly stretching the floor. Aaron Eulis, not a big threat. Raleigh Wooster, here and there, hit a big one against St. Mary's, so that's not exactly his game. Excuse me. So I've also been burned by that too many times, whether it's Nebraska, Duke, or some dark horse I'm looking to make a run. If only this team would shoot it. If only this team would shoot it. Let's see, if this guy shoots 35%, if this team shoots 36%. It just doesn't happen all that often in college. The guys take a big leap shooting the ball. If there's a coach that's going to make it happen, it's Fred Hoiberg and his pedigree shooting the rock. But if Nebraska is going to continue to shoot 30% or worse from three-point range, you're right. You have to be not just efficient, but ruthlessly efficient inside the arc. That means Nebraska has to get better at finishing. That means Bryce Williams, Connor Seaton, Raleigh Wooster, Aaron Eulis, who had a couple tough finishes tonight. Those guys have to cook in the mid-range. Those aren't high-percentage shots or high-efficiency shots, but Nebraska's going to, maybe have to live or die by them sometimes. You're going to need role guys to step up and shoot. But the other thing to your point about the turnovers is when Nebraska has opportunities, they have to convert, but Nebraska also has to maximize the number of opportunities, right? If Nebraska is not going to shoot the ball from three, it can go one of two ways. Nebraska can look like prime Virginia, slow the game down, make sure you get a paint touch every possession, and then live with the results from there. Or Nebraska really has to run. Nebraska has to be more aggressive on defense and pick up the pace, get out in transition. But like I said, that's not necessarily what Nebraska wants to do with its defensive identity. Fred Hoiberg said tonight, too, he thought his guys did a good job of running selectively, something Strick has talked about a lot. When they have the opportunity, go. If they don't have numbers or advantage, they're going to slow it down. So like I said, I don't expect Nebraska to change its defensive identity, nor should it after this long. So it's going to come down to, hey, Nebraska, you're an old team. That starting lineup with Wooster, Williams, Gary, Boyukengel, and Mia, all those guys have played at least a year of college basketball, if not 2, 3, or in most cases 4. So Nebraska has to be locked in on the details offensively. They have to be strong going to the rim and finish. They can't pass up high-quality looks because I do still think the half-court offense is going to be different. It's going to be a departure, to your point, of what we normally see from Fred Hoiberg. But again, credit the coach. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah.
But Nebraska has to continue to make the most of those opportunities.
And yeah, I mean, Hoiberg kind of before the game was saying that he's like, keeps saying, oh, we're going to get the wood off the basket. And I do agree that they can probably shoot it a little bit better, but I don't expect this team to shoot anywhere near what they were shooting last year. I mean, Nebraska just lost all their shooters from last year, in my opinion. They don't have Tominaga. They don't have Wilcher, Lawrence. Even Mast was shooting from deep. I mean, this team just really doesn't have that many shooters. So like you said, they're really going to have to rely on some interior play. It almost feels like this team is like a complete 180 of last year's team. I mean, last year's team, I felt like didn't guard on the perimeter very well. They didn't have that much depth inside. This year, they've been guarding pretty well on the perimeter. They have a lot of depth on the inside. And now, last year, they could shoot the ball pretty well from three. Now they can't this year, so they're having to rely on inside. I mean, it just seems like this team took a complete 180 turn, which isn't that surprising when Nebraska kind of, I don't want to say they overhauled their roster. They had some returning guys, but a lot of new faces on this team.
Let me word salad my way through that thought.
All right.
in a lot of ways, I see what you're saying, right? The CJ Wilcher was streaky. Casey Tominaga was a once-in-a-generation type of player for Nebraska. Nebraska had 2 big guys last year. They have 3 this year. It feels different. It looks different, even though there's enough of, I think, the same core returning. The principles aren't going to change. I don't think Nebraska was necessarily bad guarding the perimeter last year.
No.
But they could get burned by a Terrence Shannon Jr., by a Wade Taylor. I think Sam Hoiberg is a perfect matchup for Stephen Ashworth. He came in and changed the game. I think Aaron Eulis did a pretty decent job on Pop Isaacs for the most part. So I do think that in terms of the guard play, Creighton at the very least was probably a better matchup for Nebraska than some other teams that they'll face. A little concerned about the Raleigh Wooster versus Stephen Ashworth matchup. They didn't go to Raleigh Wooster against Ashworth in the paint a lot, but Wooster also didn't get toasted by Ashworth on the perimeter very much. So it looks different. There are certainly ways you can say this is different, that's different, but I still think the general outline of the similar team is there, even if in the specifics it looks a little different.
No, I could definitely see where you're coming from there. Before we wrap it up, I mean, I just want to I asked this last question to Nick. I want to ask it to you. How has your view of this team now changed after this game? I get it's just one game, but do you view this team any differently right now than you did before 7 o'clock today?
Oof. Hard not to. it's interesting coming off that St. Mary's performance because my thought on this Nebraska team is that it probably has a little bit higher of a floor because of the slightly different style or results that Nebraska is going to get because of how upperclassmen they are. My concerns have never been about the floor with this team. Excuse me. It's just so veteran. You trust the coaching staff. My concern has always been about the ceiling. If the three-point shooting doesn't come around, if they get exposed athletically again, if the pieces don't fit together, I understand Nebraska being picked 12th in the Big Ten in the preseason, 13th in that range. I thought it was a little disrespectful. The first few games said, hey, maybe people were right. And this is a rivalry game, right? There better be some extra juice behind it. But there's also no excuse for the other games to not feel like this or not have this attention to detail, this sense of urgency. I still think it's an uphill battle for Nebraska to make it to the NCAA tournament. I think this is a win, a bullet point on their resume that will certainly help. I still don't know how consistently we'll see this for Nebraska, but at least tonight, they proved that they could do it. Will they be able to do it all year? I don't know. This feels very much like a more traditional kind of mid-2000s to early 2010s Big Ten team. So if you had to ask me today, did my opinion of Nebraska change enough for me to project them into the NCAA tournament? Not right now. But I saw things from Nebraska tonight that I hadn't seen through the first 4 games or 3 games, however many it was. And now they said, hey, this is who we can be in a hostile environment against a team where we have some good matchups, we have some bad matchups. Now, like you said, it's just been 1 game. Let's see this carry over through the rest of the month of November, through December, into the new year, into the grind of Big Ten conference play. I think Nebraska can still make some noise in the middle of the Big Ten conference. So my perspective, my thoughts on the ceiling of this team, maybe not as ironclad as it was before. It still might be an uphill climb, but this is a big data point. If this doesn't change your opinion somewhat, I would say I would be the most hard-headed, obstinate host at the station, and I don't want to be that. So I still have my questions. This didn't answer all of them, but it got me raising my eyebrows.
No, I agree. I mean, I feel like consistency is the word that's been brought up a lot on this postgame show. Nick said it. Can they do this consistently? You've just now said it. And I'm kind of in the same boat where it's not impossible to picture this consistently, but I feel like it's going to be really hard for any team to not shoot the ball very well, to have to rely on not turning the ball over, forcing a lot of turnovers. I don't want to say hoping the other team doesn't shoot it very well, but hoping the other team doesn't have a great shooting night.
The other thing you're relying on is Big Ten officiating.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, Nebraska got to the foul line, another 30 times tonight? I think 22 of 30.
Yeah.
At the line. We've had a lot of Big Ten officiating conversations. I don't know if averaging 30 free throw attempts per game is sustainable. It's a physical conference. It's a bump and grind conference. There are some ticky-tack calls tonight that the Big Ten officials might let slide. So Nebraska, I do think, still has to find a way to improve offensively. But as long as they're getting to the free throw line, again, that just kind of raises the floor for this offense, because 73% shooting from the free throw line, that's good. You absolutely take that. Mm-hmm. But Nebraska is closer to an 80% team from the line. Connor Sejan won't go 1 for 3 very often. Andrew Morgan won't go 1 for 2 or 0 for 2 very often. So, again, the offensive consistency in terms of the sets and putting the ball in the basket has to improve, but there are ways for Nebraska to mitigate that, like at the free throw line.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I feel like this was like a perfect storm for Nebraska to be able to pull off an upset. Creighton, I feel like Nebraska matched up pretty well with Creighton, but we saw last year, against a team that's a little bit more athletic. Do you feel like Nebraska could match up? How am I wanting to say this? Last year, we saw Texas A&M just come in, just with a more athletic team. Nebraska got exposed on the perimeter a little bit. Do you still have the same kind of concerns about this team? If you face a really athletic team that Nebraska could struggle?
I mean, I think there's always going to be that concern. Nebraska is not unathletic. I think the positive for Nebraska is that there's not a Terrence Shannon Jr. in the conference, and that Nebraska proves that it can match up with. I'm trying to think through some of the names here, like a Mackenzie Mbako potentially from Indiana. There's no Pharrell Payne or Joshua Ola Joseph. Both those guys left Minnesota. There's plenty of athleticism in the Big Ten, don't get me wrong, and we're still learning the characters, still learning the names. So it's still a concern. But again, Nebraska's going to kind of take its chances there. Nebraska is not necessarily afraid to let, one guy take over for their team. Nebraska will take its chances on everyone else and trust that its balanced team approach will take over. Didn't work last year for Nebraska in the second half of the Big Ten tournament against Illinois, not in the first half of the NCAA tournament against Texas A&M. But Nebraska's won those types of matchups before. It's just not a huge margin for error.
I mean, kind of talking about that one guy. I mean, that's kind of supposed to be Bryce Williams. He didn't have a bad game by any means tonight, but Bryce Williams is kind of seen, and I still see him as that guy that can kind of take over a game. He didn't quite do it tonight, but I feel like one thing that I do like about this team from last year is that I feel like Bryce Williams is a guy that can take over in a tournament game, something that maybe Nebraska didn't have on the roster last year.
Yeah, I think another year growth is big for Bryce Williams. I do think that Raleigh Wooster can hit a timely shot.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get contributions from Connor Seeds in his third year in college basketball. There's maybe some untapped potential from even like an Andrew Morgan posting up. But we've seen Bryce Williams, score, over 25 points twice already this year. Teams are going to know he's Nebraska's go-to guy. So this is where it's going to be vitally important for Bryce Williams in Nebraska to walk that fine line of getting Bryce Williams the ball, keeping him in rhythm even when it's tough, and also recognizing those moments where, hey, other teams are selling out to stop Bryce Williams, right? So what's going to happen is in those moments, this is where we see the growth from Bryce Williams as a passer and as a playmaker for others. Once guys hit shots to open things back up for Bryce Williams, he gets the favorable one-on-one matchups. That's when he has to attack. Out of a timeout, Nebraska went right to Bryce Williams to stop a run. Out of a timeout, Nebraska went right to Raleigh Wooster to stop a run. I think those are the two guys who will have the ball in their hands most often for Nebraska at the end of some of these close games.
All right, there we go. We better start wrapping it up. We've been going for an hour and 12 minutes. It's been a great post-game show. Austin, thank you so much for calling in. Appreciate it. Nebraska's next game is at home on Wednesday against South Dakota at 5:30. So make sure we're going to tune into that game. But big win for Nebraska. They beat Creighton 74-63. And Justin on YouTube said, Ben, I hope you haven't been there since 6 a.m. because I did early break. No, I have not been here since 6 a.m. I did go home in between. Don't worry, Justin. They've not been working me over a 12-hour shift.
Before I go, I'll hang up with this. First of all, thanks for stopping in, young Ben. Appreciate you being on the board with the rest of us up in Omaha. Action, Plumbing, Heating, AC, and Electrical. Thanks for your sponsorship. Wall-to-Wall Wine and Spirits. Appreciate your sponsorship as well of post-game coverage. Looking forward to doing this more often. Biggest win of the season for Nebraska. Eyebrow-raising data point. Like you said, Ben, let's see the Huskers followed up again on Wednesday.
All right, there we go. Thank you, Austin, for some post-game. And for that, we're going to sign off. Thank you for listening. Post-game right here after the Creighton game.
I think it's just vapor.
Vaping is safer than smoking, isn't it?
There's really not even that much nicotine in them, right?
One vape pod has as much nicotine as one pack of cigarettes.
My kid?
My kid knows
it's dangerous. 5.4